Yes, it was very confusing. I feel like I definitely remember a lot of emotion at once. Shock, sadness, confusion. I just, the analogy I continually returned to was just the feeling of like a rug being pulled out from under me.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the forum, author, and speaker. Today, I will be sitting down with a young guest, Cariysa Powell, who lives in Rochester, New York. Cariysa is the oldest of 6 children. She was homeschooled growing up and is currently a senior at the Rochester Institute of Technology and expects to graduate with a Bachelor of Science degree in Hospitality Management next spring. Cariysa is also a certified catechist and co-leads Level 1 Catechesis of the Good Shepherd for preschoolers and first graders at her home parish. Cariysa belongs to Rochester's multi-parish Catholic young adult group, Converge, and loves socializing and growing closer to God with her friends. She also enjoys cooking, baking, laughing with her siblings, and singing praise and worship music. Shortly after meeting Cariysa during an online gathering, I learned a bit of her story and how during COVID, the faith that she had known her whole life was questioned by her parents and ultimately set aside. Often in the life of a child raised as a Christian, the child, after discovering the world, can become wooed by its charms, and some set aside the faith for more alluring pursuits. But not so with Cariysa, and this made for a challenging situation. At a young age, she was tasked with trying to make sense of what she believed, what to hang on to, and what to let go, amid this crisis of faith. But ultimately, she discovered an even more vibrant faith than she thought possible, realizing that something even better was rising up in its place. How did Cariysa do it? Where did she go to find the strongholds that have kept her faithful? And what can she reveal about the landscape of young people today where the faith is concerned? Are they really leaving the Christian faith in droves, as has been reported? Or is there another picture emerging that we need to pay attention to, one more hopeful? I do want to mention that we experienced some technical issues midway through this interview, some of which we weren't able to resolve. Thankfully, Cariysa's part is fine. The issue happens on my end. So I hope you can bear with us through those patchy spots, because what Cariysa reveals is worth hanging on for. I'm looking forward to hearing more from Cariysa, straight from her heart. So let's begin. Well, welcome, Cariysa, to Matters of Soul Importance. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's a beautiful fall day at the moment. I know this is going to actually be dropping later, but at the moment the sun is shining. So hopefully that'll be the case when it drops later. But well, before we get too far into our conversation, I just want to hear a little bit about you. So if you could share about where you grew up, where you are now, and I know you're in college, so what you're studying and hoping to do someday.
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in Northern Virginia. I always say not quite Northern Virginia because it was still pretty rural where I grew up, but we were pretty close to like getting into the DC area. And then in 2022, my family moved up to Rochester, which is in Western New York, where my mom grew up and her family is. And then I started into college right after that. I'm the oldest of 6, and I'm studying hospitality management, which is like learning about hotels, restaurants, and all the other facets of the hospitality industry, like casinos, resorts. And it's really interesting. I'm enjoying it a lot. Usually the departments tend to be kind of small, which is really nice because you get to know everybody. And I'm especially interested in sort of the food aspect of hospitality and also how to use hospitality as a force for social good. So I'm still trying to figure out what that will entail or where God wants me to go with that.
It's funny because I'm thinking of you as an oldest of 6, and I have 5 kids, and my oldest daughter is very organized and like to plan her own birthday parties. And it seems like that's kind of like, I'm seeing that kind of emerge in this picture of, I bet you had, you had a lot of responsibility probably as the oldest and a daughter, I'm thinking. So
yes, and I'm the only girl, so.
Oh my heavens, yeah. Oh gosh, you had all those boys to keep in line. Woo, that is crazy.
Yes.
Well, so that's exciting. So our question today is going to really center around a crisis that you and your family experienced about 5 years ago when during the COVID pandemic, the world tilted a bit. We all felt it, and some significant strongholds in your life seemed to fall away. But before we go into that, tell me a little bit more about growing up in you've given us a little glimpse now. You were the oldest of 6 and all the rest were boys. What was that like? And what was the faith like growing up?
So it was really quite an amazing experience, actually. I feel like my family was very nuclear in a good way growing up. So my mom was stay at home. My dad worked from home. He's a freelancer. And myself and all my siblings were homeschooled. So we got to spend a lot of time together. And I really think that helped us to get along as well as we did and just enjoy our lives together. I mean, sure, we clashed a little bit. You get to know everything about each other when you're that close, but in a good way. And our homeschooling was pretty fluid. I know it looks really different from family to family, but for us, we focused a lot on learning at like each child's pace and tailored to their individual needs. One thing we always do, though, we'd gather in the morning. On weekdays, we'd read the daily mass readings and pray quickly together. And before, my mom would either have us split up and do our own individual work, or she'd read like a group reading, etc. And then usually, especially when we were younger, we'd have the afternoons free to just play with each other, play with our friends. And since we lived in a homeschooling community, everybody else was on a similar schedule that we knew. So it was a pretty unique situation. And then in the evening, we'd always pray together as a family as well.
What would you say that you felt pretty close to God growing up? Was your relationship pretty tight?
Yes, I would say so, for sure. I would say more so on an individual level, I had some struggles, but that was mainly due to my own mental propensity, not so much my family environment. And I don't know if we quite have time for that in this podcast, but I definitely, yes, I felt like very close with God, despite some challenges due to just anxiety and scrupulosity that kind of hindered my prayer life at times. But yes, I would say for the most part, yes.
Okay. Well, the topic is kind of like almost a mirror of what usually happens. Usually when kids leave the home, they go into the world and discover the world. And sometimes it's an enticement and it can be hard. A lot of people I know had kind of a winding journey back to the faith after they left, because we're all, as young adults trying to find our way without our parents and starting over. And, God doesn't have any grandchildren, right? Like we're all like, he's all our father. And so each generation has to start anew. So what was your experience then going off to college, and how close is your home close to where you go to college?
Yes, I've always commuted. So I've sort of spent my time living with my parents and my grandparents, because both of the colleges I've attended because of a transfer are both in the city of Rochester. Okay. So yes, staying very close with my family the whole time.
Okay. And then share a little bit about what happened where was your faith during COVID? And then, I just want to hear the story of how things kind of shifted a little bit for you, especially in the faith area.
Yes, absolutely. So during COVID, I think that at least like initially and for the first couple of years, I would say our faith as a family was very really helped us get through COVID, because obviously everyone, but I think us especially, felt very isolated from our friends and our family. And our churches were closed down for a while, as everywhere in the U.S. And our family didn't return to Mass, which we had always attended regularly up to now. I can't remember missing Sunday Mass barely ever until COVID happened. So it really hit us hard, but we also didn't go back as quickly as our friends did because we were more concerned about COVID. So that sort of added an extra layer of isolation where like others were having access to the sacraments and we were not. And I think that contributed to the feeling definitely of isolation and also just kind of feeling somewhat let down by the church. Just that they were not holding the same priorities that our family was holding, and it was definitely difficult when like priests started to say, from the pulpit, people should be coming back to church, and we just felt that wasn't reflecting reality, and especially in our area where it just wasn't taken as seriously. People weren't taking measures of precaution as much as they were in some other parts of the U.S. So that definitely was difficult. I do feel personally that my faith actually, I was forced during COVID to rely on God and just realize that even though in some ways, like my personal worst fear was coming true, God still had it all in his hand, and I was still okay. Like I was kind of forced to look at myself and be like, despite any anxiety that I'm feeling, like I'm okay, my family's okay. Like we, as a family, didn't have a reason to, I guess, endanger ourselves, endanger others. So we kind of just sheltered in, and that was difficult, but at the same time, it was like, that's the best we can do, and we just have to trust God to do the rest. And I think that really had a profound impact on my faith life during that time, and my family's faith life as well. But I just feel like that I noticed I can only really speak for myself in that deeply personal experience.
How old were you, just to kind of get a picture of how old you were then and how old you are now, so we can get the timeline?
Yes, of course. I would have been about, I was 16 and a half. I turned 17 the first summer of the pandemic, 2020.
Okay. All right. So at some point, I do want to talk a little bit about, I think your parents said we're not going back to Mass like permanently, right? How did that go? How did that kind of fall? Like explain that day, I guess, if you recall.
Yes. Yeah, I'll probably never forget it. It was, so we had moved sort of in the midst of the pandemic. It was 2022. We had our new home in Rochester, and everything was good. I mean, we were on track to start our new life in our new community with my loving grandparents and my mom's relatives. I was starting to attend college. Like the future looked bright. And then that October day, my parents gathered us older kids together and said, we have to tell you something. We have had a lot of doubts about the Catholic faith, and we're no longer going to attend Mass, but we will take you, anyone who would like to continue to go to Mass, we will fully support that decision. We'll continue to take you to Mass. At the time, no one had their driver's license. I was, I think, about to get mine, or actually I could drive myself, but I didn't have a car. Anyhow, they said that to all of us older children, teenagers, who were at that age of reason to make that choice for themselves, as they deemed.
Mm-hmm. And what did you go through, Cariysa? What were your thoughts? Obviously, you love your family, you love your parents, and respect them, and you all had gone through this difficulty together. But that had to be a moment. Like I'll just tell you my little bit of example that maybe it's different, but as my husband and I were trying to follow the church's teachings, we wanted to follow natural family planning, which the church, endorses. And my NFP instructor went a different direction years into it, and her husband got a vasectomy. So I felt like, this is a hard teaching, and I needed her support, and then she disappeared on me, and it really tested me. So kind of a similar, it's not the same, but there was a moment of crisis I had to decide to move forward, and trust God. And I mean, I had children that were a result of practicing the church's, directives. And it was hard to argue at that point that was wrong, I would have to say my children were wrong, right? So anyway, my faith really grew after that, but it was a crisis for me. So anyway, what did you go through? You are getting older and starting to have some of your own thoughts, but you also kind of are bearing the brunt of like holding maybe some of that up for your siblings too. So I'm sure there was a lot going through your mind as the oldest sibling of 6.
Yes, it was very confusing. I feel like I remember a lot of emotion at once, like just shock, sadness, confusion. I just, the analogy I continually returned to was just the feeling of like a rug being pulled out from under me. Just not in a million years, would I have expected that, especially given that we had gotten through this like crisis of our world. Relying on our faith, and how strange it seemed to me that would just, that sort of strong bulwark would now be sort of abandoned, even as things were starting to get better and the world was starting to like go back to normal, I guess, quote, quote.
Because faith really is like there's a building. It's like you put this little brick in and this little brick in, and it just, there's a building up, and then all of a sudden I can see where it felt like a rug did get pulled out, or the earth shifted or something.
Yes.
So what did you do then? What was your response?
So we definitely had a big conversation that night, lots of tears. I know everyone shed tears, but I definitely sensed that I was, at least outwardly, I seemed the most heartbroken by the situation and the most torn as to what to do next. The next day was a Sunday, and I remember we all went to the lake beach together instead of going to mass. But then the following week, I decided I couldn't do that anymore. Like, I just knew I had to go back to mass, and I wasn't really sure why. I didn't have like a reasoned out explanation for myself. I just knew the alternative was kind of nothing. So I knew I couldn't handle that. So I asked my parents to take me to mass, and they continued to do so until I was able to drive myself more often and have my own car.
Well, another thing about that timing is like so many of us were like grappling. We were just begging to get back to mass and receive the sacraments. And I remember people crying when they got to receive the Eucharist again. And it was such a coveted thing to, I had a chance because I do some hosting for Real Presence Radio, and they had a private mass right before one of our shows. And it was when other people couldn't go, but my co-host was a priest. And so he's like, do you want to, I'll do mass here. And that was like, I just felt like so blessed and excited that I had that. And, so that's the contrast there too, is that, like you said, you had gotten through that and now it's open again. And yet there's this thing that's happening. So just again, keeping kind of along your story, because that's really the only story we can tell. What was it like then to go to mass by yourself? I mean, did you receive consolation? Were you feeling God's presence, like saying, thank you for being with me. I'm here with you still, or what sort of things were happening then during that time?
It was pretty difficult. I mean, I'd always gone to mass with my family like my whole life. So at first going to mass alone was really hard. And especially around the holidays when I, like, for example, the idea of going to Christmas mass alone was really difficult. Luckily, I was able to go to some of those like high feast days with relatives who were still Catholic. But definitely just like the everyday Sunday mass all alone was a very weird experience. And just very lonely, and strange too, because like my dad would pick me up, especially in the early days, he'd pick me up and kind of be like, "How was mass?" And I wouldn't know what to say. Like, it was just such a strange, surreal situation. And my parents acknowledged that too, how like it was not anything they'd ever expected, and how it almost like just felt like faith had been lost, not like it had been intentionally set aside almost. But
I mean, and that's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that they, just from the outside, that they lost that during, that is a loss, to have that assurance and that guidance, and then to have that crisis. And obviously they're following their conscience as the best that they can. And it just, I'm curious, as you were saying that you would, because that would be hard to be alone then. I would think you'd feel your aloneness even more, because you used to have this big bustling family that was, probably elbowing each other and whatever during Mass. And now you're just there, and maybe it was more peaceful. But what about the relatives? Were there any responses? Because, we're never in isolation, right? When decisions are made, when things happen, like everyone's affected. So I'm just curious. And again, I don't want to probe too hard. I know you want to respect your parents' journey too, but what were the responses? Did you feel comforted by the family members that were willing to come to Mass with you? Was there anything there that you want to share?
Yes, definitely my relatives, my grandparents and my mom's sister, my aunt. I've always been close with them, and definitely their faith has been definitely just strengthened me, especially during this difficult time. I know they were really sad too when this happened, and we've had a few conversations just trying to process what's happened. But it's difficult, but it's also a comfort that life goes on, and we all still love one another, and we have to figure out how to relate on a daily basis. But yes, definitely for the holidays, it was a great blessing to have some family members who would still feel the same way about the faith, and you could go to Christmas Mass with them or Easter Mass, and sometimes just talk over things that need a Catholic perspective of advice.
Right, because you were still growing in that faith so much, and now it was kind of like, oh, and now I got to figure out for myself. I'm not really going to, get the answers I'm going to be searching for aren't probably going to come from my parents right now, because they're having a faith crisis. So I need to go elsewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow. As a mom, I have this maternal thought about all this, and I'm just thinking of God looking at you and just smiling, just looking at you and your heart and seeing that you still really desire to be near him. And I just have a feeling he's very happy and proud that you stayed with him and did not let go of his hand. And that's so beautiful. So what were some other ways you kind of went through that time? And I know when I talked to you earlier, you shared about friendships and things like that. Share about how you filled in the gaps of you didn't have your family journeying with you anymore. And I think you shared that your siblings pretty much went with your parents. And I'm sure they're still growing, and who knows, they're on their journey too. So, and they were younger, but so how did you fill in those gaps? How did you fill in the loss of your family and find a new family, really?
Yes, that I really see God's hand in that a lot, because it was only like a month or so after my family had left that I started to meet Catholic friends in the area, and it was a little slow at first, but it's so funny how God works, because my first friend in college, we just randomly happened to be study partners, and we liked doing that together, and then we discovered we both were Catholic, and it was, just a community college, completely secular. Like there was no telling why that would have happened or how. And then a friend, well, he became a friend quickly, came to a very small young adult group I was attending, and he shared his plans for a new young adult group that he was going to build, and he had a new website, and I was very excited to join him. And then almost before we knew it, he started planning events. He'd have them all the time, like different days of the week, so the young adult could make them, because schedules can be tricky if you only have things on a certain day of the week. That sometimes cuts off a certain amount of people who can attend. And the community grew very quickly. It was a multi-parish initiative, and I started making friends in that community, and it was really, really what my heart needed then, because I was very much at sea. Even though I still believed everything my parents taught me growing up, I felt like some things needed like reinterpretation, or I needed some encouragement, because when you've grown up with certain doctrinal truths being taught to you, and then people who taught those things to you tell you they don't believe them anymore, and they have like reasons for that, it can be pretty hard to form your own like rebuttals or reasoning.
Right.
So it was
Can you
good to have
share?
some sound.
Yeah. What were a few of those, just to give us an example of some of those moments where it was a question mark now? Do you remember any in particular?
Yes. So I think one big thing was like, I mean, they were common issues, nothing new, but just so, I guess, deeply rooted that I just had to face the fact that I didn't have an answer. I just had to sit with that. Like, I can't prove you wrong. And that's still very difficult. But for example, like scriptural infallibility, like there are obviously, you could argue till you're blue in the face about scriptural infallibility, but and it does come down, I think, to a certain amount of faith. Like you can't always reason away your questions, but or like the question of Jesus's divinity, I think was a big one for my parents, and that I'm still, I would say that those discussions still have the capacity to confuse me because, again, it's not something I can prove to them, like one way or the other. But it helped to talk to faithful friends who had done their own research on the matter, and they had their own, I guess, encouragement or rebuttal to the problems that my parents or family might pose to me, or questions, I guess is a better word.
Yeah, again, it's so opposite of what we usually, it's usually the parents and that the kids are losing their faith. And so the parents are having to try to figure out how to explain it better now that they're adults and get into these conversations and figure out when to have the conversation, when not. So it's really just the mirror opposite of kind of what a lot of us have gone through.
So it's so difficult. Like,
but it also is an opportunity for growth, because even just in college, I went through some kind of winding roads too. I was challenged by a lot of Christians that were challenging the Catholic faith, and even went into some Bible studies and had a summer with them. And but ultimately, I did actually grow in my Catholic faith, and when it was time to go back to college, I ran to the Newman Center where I had been journeying with fellow Catholics, and just realized that was really my home. But all of those challenges have figured into like what I would call my reversion, where I came back into my faith more fully, because I married a non-Catholic, and he was kind of not sure, and so I was kind of trying to wait to see what was going to happen there before I got too far ahead. And then finally, I just had to dive in, and I fell in love with the church as I was learning it as an adult, and I wanted now to teach it to my kids. So that was my next move. But so I'm just curious too, like, how did your relationship with God grow? I'm just assuming the word tender is coming up in my mind, because I think he has a special tenderness for you, because for a child to kind of be, I know it seems harsh, but kind of abandoned in a way in that moment, again, not to judge your parents and what their experience is, but from your perspective, it does feel a little bit like an abandonment. So I am just assuming that God was super tender with you. And wow, I mean, the things that you're saying, like how you got paired up with a Catholic roommate, and now there's this guy that's on fire and doing all these things and connecting, and we need community, and you found that. That's so beautiful and powerful. And I think just a sign how much he loves you and wants to accompany you. Did you feel that?
I really did, especially looking back on it now, and to see how many other people in like the budding ministry have expressed a similar thing. Like, wow, like we have like some people who have like at least one person who's definitely a reversion experience, people who are just growing in their faith or finding their soulmate, or just be finding new joy in their faith. So I'm definitely not alone in that, and just having the support, because everybody comes from a different place. Everybody has their own struggles. So I think this is like our space for where God can speak to all of us. But yes, for me specifically, I think, yeah, like God was really, just has been really kind and giving me lots of people to support me, and just being there himself. Like, I think one of the biggest things that came to me in the early days when I was still like just not even sure where to go next, I just thought to myself, like, I can't, like, whenever I thought about leaving like Christianity, really, because that's what it was. It wasn't just Catholicism, but leaving Christianity. I was like, I just can't lose Jesus. Like, I don't know, like, how anybody can abandon like overnight, or like a lifetime relationship with Jesus. Like no matter what it's been like what wouldn't you rather have him than not? So I guess that still puzzles me. And I'm not saying like I still have, so much, I need to grow so much in that relationship, but just having any sort of relationship with him is such a gift. Like, I can't lose it. And that was, I guess, what motivated me to discover, well, why can't I lose it? Like, what is it that I can't lose?
Right. And I wonder too, I'm assuming that this actually, like, I feel like in a way, there's always blessings that can come out of suffering, but I feel like you're probably stronger than you would have been. I mean, I don't know, but if you just kind of had gone off in your own and pushed off like so many kids do, and then kind of wandered away, but that didn't happen. Like you were tested early on and you had to answer some of those questions, and you're still on that journey. But it is all about like the faith it's really lived out day by day. And it's like the little habits that we form and just living in gratitude, and all these little things are what make it, an alive thing. And yes, there's the rational aspect of it, and we have to, come to that, and we have to have the brain, we have to ask the questions, but ultimately it's not about that. It's about just trusting, right? There's a trust thing. And I've struggled with that too. Like during COVID was when I kind of had a crisis. It wasn't, I wasn't like going to go away from my faith, but I really did wonder, like, where are you, God? Like, I don't know. All of a sudden I felt a little bit abandoned by God. Like, cause I felt like stuff is happening and it seems like you're kind of, where are you? Like, and now I can't even go to mass, and Easter's canceled. Like, what was going on? So we're all going through that crisis, but I think all tested, lots of testing going on, and not everyone. Some people failed the tests. Like, that's where we're at. But of course, we can never give up on anyone. So we can now you have a lot of people to pray for, right?
Yes, that's so true.
Yeah. And also it's just, again, it's flipped. Like me as a parent, my biggest thing is I can't control, obviously, anything about my kids as far as their faith, but I can live mine out, and I can continue to love God and love others the best I can, and to be that model. And that's your challenge too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that's definitely the best way, because I think it would definitely, some people would be turned off if you tried to present like a piously, like, I'm praying for your conversion. Like, that's definitely not going to fly with some individuals. So you must, preach the gospel at all times, if necessary, use words. Is the best method.
Another thought I had, I meant to bring this up earlier, was when you were talking about what do I do, where do I go? And I thought of the scripture passage, what is it, Peter, but Lord, to whom else where will we go if we don't have you? I'm sure that's a scripture passage that has resonated with you. Like,
yes, absolutely. Yes. And like what you were saying a few minutes ago, about the difference between like trusting and knowing intellectually, I feel like that's definitely something I struggled with a lot, because at a certain point it's like, well, I can't reason you into being God. Like I can't do that. I don't have the answers, but like I feel that you are. So at a certain point I have to let go and just accept, like, and in some ways it takes like some humility. Like, yeah, I can't answer all your questions. Like I can't prove to you that Jesus is God, but I just know he is.
Yeah.
And it's cliche, but it feels right.
It is. Yeah. We can't prove an invisible God in a science lab. No, we can't. We can, however, be reasonable, and we can find God through mere reason. When I've had conversations, I always go back, like, how did it begin? Like, how are we here? How are we talking right now? How are we manifest in bodily form? Like, something had to start it. It had to be a creator that was outside of creation. And so let's just start there. But I realized, like, for your family, it was more questioning Jesus. And so then
praise God, they still know him. His existence is not something we're debating.
Right.
But yeah, about Jesus. And that's been very, very difficult, because obviously everybody in the world has a different opinion about Jesus. So
right. Well, I want to hear more about what you're doing in college and sort of like the projects you're doing and how you're reaching out and being that light in the world, because the world is in great need of the light right now. And you were put here for a specific time and place. Things didn't go as it should have possibly, or what God maybe would have willed it, but yet He will work with any broken situation, and He's accompanying you in a very beautiful way. So we're going to take a break. We're going to talk about that, and then I also want to ask you about sort of like what you're seeing as far as your peers and what's kind of going out there in the world of like belief and not belief, and because it's kind of crazy out there right now. But I have a feeling you have like a little bit more insight than some of us oldies. So I'm going to ask you about that too on the other side of the break. Cariysa, it's been great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to more. So we'll be right back with more Matters of Soul Importance.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
Well, welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. I am talking this morning with Cariysa Powell. She is over in Rochester, New York, not to be confused by Rochester, Minnesota, which is a little bit closer to where we are, but she's way out there in the other part of the world, and sharing a little bit about what it was like when her parents kind of went in a different direction and decided to depart from the Christian faith after she had been led in that direction her whole life. So the challenges, how God accompanied her. And now I want to hear a little bit about more what that's looking like as she's in college. Now, Cariysa, what year are you again? I think you probably told me, but I have to remember. Are you a junior?
I'm actually a senior.
You're a senior. Okay, so you're really at the cusp here, getting ready to go out into the world.
Yes.
How is your faith informing your preparedness for life, and how are the people around you? Like, what's going on with your Christian community in college? Like, tell us about it.
Yes. So it's interesting because I don't have, like, I go to a very secular school, so I don't really have a lot of faith experiences immediately attached to my school. But then maybe I'll go for a day of classes, and then I'll have like a weekday event with my young adult group, and they have just so many events that it's easy to intersperse like faith-filled fellowship with my everyday life in the, I guess, secular world, if you want to call it that. I also have several really good friends who are very faithful, and we text each other all the time. It really lifts our spirits and helps keep us on track. And we also love talking about theological and philosophical questions. So oftentimes we'll be up late at night texting over a very heady topic, but it's just something that brings us joy and keeps us focused on God. And sometimes there are little surprises too. Like I was just out the other day sitting outside my college and saying the Divine Mercy Chaplet on my rosary, and one of the international students noticed me, and he said, "Hey, like, are you Catholic?" And I would never have known. I was actually curious to know if he was, but we both sort of connected over that. And now when we say goodbye to each other, we can say "God bless you." So It's just, you just never know, like, where the like-minded people are in your life. But yes, my faith informing me. I feel like, honestly, it's only grown, which is since the, I guess, crisis, which has been a real blessing. Just finding new ways, and I guess as a young adult, like realizing, like, even though it's painful that I'm now on my own in this, like, I also have the freedom to go where I want to go. Like, I'm a young adult, so I can go to adoration if I want to, and I don't have to, like, let my parents know where I'm going. I have the freedom to do that, or practice different devotions that maybe I couldn't do as much as a sort of more anxious teenager that was still kind of under my parents' guidance as far as like what was healthy for me at that time. But now that I'm well in my mind, and I have like my own authority over my time, I can now practice those devotions or prayers in a way that's good for me.
I just have to cut in really quick because again, I see this interesting like parallel or like contrast because usually when kids go to college, they're like, I get away now. I can do whatever I want. I can go to parties. I can do whatever. I don't have to listen to my parents. Now you're like sneaking off to the Adoration Chapel. I love it.
Well, hopefully not literally, but yes. I did have a friend tell me that she did that as a child. I was like, wow, like the things us Catholic kids do. No, but I don't want to flatter myself too hard. I definitely have all the your typical challenges as far as waking up in time for classes, etc. But I do feel like my propensity to things of faith has grown even as it's not a part of my family life anymore. I think maybe some of that is just human propensity, but I think a lot of it is God, really. Like, for example, like I've just felt, especially lately, just looking forward to Sunday Mass in like a very like a profound way, and that's sort of like a new. I think it's almost like. I think it's definitely a grace from God, but also maybe cultivating an appreciation for it that I just didn't have before. Like there's just sort of always room to grow, and sometimes you don't even really know like where that next growth is going to unfold in your life. So it's definitely been an exciting journey.
That's nice because I mean, as Catholics, we are compelled. We have to go to daily Mass. If we don't, or not daily, I'm sorry, weekly Mass. Not doing so is a mortal sin, which is a whole other conversation. So when we're younger, we do what we're supposed to do and we're told to do. But later, I see what, in a way, it's like you were doing what you were obligated, that's the word, obligated to do. And yet now, like, you're realizing it's actually a gift that you want to go to, like that you realize you're being fed there. And I think about your small group too. Like when I was raising my family, one thing that was hugely important was I had a faith sharing group that we gathered every week. And that became very, very instrumental in terms of just being fortified to go back out into the world, because we were starting to see a world that was kind of very anti-Christian, and that was scary as parents to see that our kids were going to be confronting that. So we gathered to try to get fortified to go back out. So I see that same thing is kind of what you're doing in your young adult groups, and now you're getting ready to go out to the world even further. So what's the plan there? I mean, what are your thoughts about how you're going to hang on to your faith as you push out from the college scene?
Well, a lot of it's still in the mind of God there. I'm kind of trying to figure out what that will look like, but definitely continued involvement in my community regardless. I love being involved in my young adult group. I'm hoping to become more involved as I have more free time. I already co-lead the women's group that is kind of an offshoot of the main group. And I've definitely had some interest in possibly doing some missionary work with maybe Focus or NET or another local group. But we'll have to see how that fits in with the missionary opportunities God has at hand. I also am a catechist for little kids, and that's been really a beautiful experience, and I'm hoping to continue with that too.
Well, again, I see the older sister who was responsible, and probably babysat a lot. Now you're kind of now you have this leadership roles, not just one, but many. So it's really beautiful that God is putting you in those positions to actually lead younger ones.
It is, and I really feel like it's through him for sure, because it's not necessarily something I would seek out, but more just an opportunity that arose, and they needed someone, and I guess God nudged and said, "You can do that." Yeah.
And I think your strength has grown from your experiences. So, Cariysa, I am curious now. The big question is, can you enlighten us on just the scene out there with Gen Zer? What are you seeing? What are the conversations happening, whether it's in the faith realm or the secular realm? What sort of things are coming onto your horizon to either motivate you or just incite more conversations, give you hope or despair? What are you seeing? Tell us.
Yeah, I actually see a lot of reasons to be hopeful, and I find it really interesting, especially compared with, I guess, like the classic statistic, like, oh, like young people leaving the church in droves. But I just don't know if that's, at least on a situational level or like a more micro level, I don't know if that's, I don't think that's actually true. I think the reverse might be true, which is really, really encouraging. Especially since, so in my young adult group, there are several converts to the faith, and some, like at least one revert. And that's definitely very, and they're like very, just so inspired, like just so excited and just passionate. Like they're ready, like they just converted like a couple years ago and they're already ready to like lead Bible studies. They're just so on fire for their faith. And when I've spoken to them, it just seems like they had like this hunger for truth, and just the Catholic Church attracted them in a beautiful way. And I actually was at a talk with a Chris Stefanik, and he also cited like a similar phenomenon, and he said that that he'd observed this as well. I was, and then even another Catholic speaker mentioned that just young people are attracted by like the stability and structure of the church, as well as the truth which they are seeking, and that also draws them into the fold. So I've definitely observed that like in my faith communities, and I think it's definitely true. Like attract like. Sometimes the two like good friends I've made through college, just at random in my classes, one was already Catholic and one was like a lapsed Catholic, who's very Catholic curious and very very faith filled. She's definitely of a Christian mind, even though she doesn't attend church regularly, and it's also really interesting to me, like how people can find their way kind of back to the church or back to other like-minded individuals, even if they've had a challenging life, or it's a life that's been like, for whatever reason, turned away from God. And I think it's also been good for me too to get outside of my, as it's so much of my life, and that's somewhat of like a Catholic bubble, I guess, for lack of a better word. So it's good to come out into, I guess, the larger world and just see how many great people are there, and how just sort of see in real life what you've learned in catechism class, are like the natural laws in everybody's hearts, and everybody is good, like, and they're children of God, like whether they really know it or not. So that's definitely affected my lived experience.
One of the things I love when I travel is to discover that God is everywhere we go. And that was something, actually, when I was in high school, I took a couple trips, and I remember I was kind of feeling like alone a little bit on this one trip away from home. But I was like, oh, God is like, he's still with me. I can go anywhere and he's going to be with me. Nobody else is with me that I know, but he's still here. I can still access him. And it was such a beautiful, I was probably like 17 when I had that moment. But I'm still experiencing that. It could be in an Uber driver or, whatever, someone at a restaurant, or in a hotel or whatever. I just love that. God really, he doesn't diminish, he expands as we go out into the world. We just have to have eyes to see, right?
Yes, that's very important. Kind of the way, like, you can go, like, there's a church in any town, but if you go in, there's the same Jesus in the tabernacle, so, like, you can feel at home despite whatever else is happening.
That's one of my favorite things about traveling, is going to mass at churches. And just
I love that too.
You're going to hang out with your family just in a different town. So really cool. Yeah. What would you say to the older generations as far as how we should approach the younger generations? Maybe a sensitivity that some of us don't have, because we've already kind of like refined things, or we think we have. We're all children really at the end of the day. But is there any way you can be a bridge from my generation, I'm Gen X, to Z, and how should we maybe reframe things, rethink things a little bit to be more just to come together? I guess we need each other, right?
We do. That's a really good question. It probably deserves a less off the cuff answer, but I would say, I think the more people are experienced like the other generation, the better they understand one another. I don't know if you remember if this happened to you, but it definitely happened to me. Like as a young child, my parents, they'd say like, "Oh, those teenagers, like they do X, Y, and Z." But then once they actually had their own teenagers, that dialogue quickly stopped. So I think like once you have lived experience of people from another generation, you start to realize like, oh, I was really stereotyping, like in real life, they aren't so bad. Like they're a lot like me, or they're whatever it might be, like smarter than I thought, or so I think we're kind of all in our own little boxes. Like we interact with our own age groups, like we're still in grade school, and then we think everybody on the outside is so different. But obviously, like that's something we both need to work on. Like not just Gen X or not just Gen Z. But I guess another thing I would say is like don't despair. Like don't think that we're so different we can never be friends. Like some of my like closest friends are like almost 10 years older than me. I mean they're not quite, they're kind of in that in between place, but like we get along very well. Like I think it's more like the maturity of mind or heart like that helps us to relate. I would also say like there's probably reasons, I'm sure there are reasons for like Gen X to just despair and Gen Z, but I also think there's a lot of hope. Like whenever I look around and see like my generation, I see like so many people who are just strong and hardworking, and they just really want a better world, and they're passionate about what they believe in, and they like so many people, like they love the Lord. They want like to create like beautiful new families. Like they just really want to renew the church and renew society. So I mean, it's true that like maybe a minority of people who don't want that and are like depressed and dragging other people down with them, but I don't think it's the majority. Like I think there's hope out there.
Well, we need to hear that. So that's lovely. I'm going to throw a zinger at you, and we can decide if we're going to keep it in. But Charlie Kirk, I that was a moment also kind of where the world kind of, I don't know, or at least our country kind of stopped. What are you hearing about that situation? And are your peers, what are they saying?
It's so interesting. I feel like this topic, as with like many other controversial topics, like when you're with like, especially if you're in a group that knows that like some of its members might be highly polarized around this topic, they actually don't really talk about it. Like they avoid the topic. It's like it's taboo. But we actually did broach it in our women's group just very sensitively, which I was impressed by like the ability of our group to handle just some slight discussion around the topic, and just I thought we did a really good job, and I tried to like emphasize like how important it is to be able to talk about things that are polarizing and still be friends, because I think that's definitely what's messing up the world today. Like that we feel like we're just all in our own camps and we can't speak about what's bothering us. And I think if Catholics are more encouraged to speak what they're feeling, like my family might still be in the church today. Like I think the cultural like discomfort with sharing any doubts, it's not anybody's fault per se, but it's just the culture. Like you don't feel comfortable sharing your doubts. You don't feel comfortable debating the faith. Anyway, that's sort of off topic, but I just feel like the more we can encourage like healthy dialogue, not like posts that glorify murder. Like that's not what I mean by dialogue, but I mean like people saying like, wow, this is a really sad thing, or like this is someone who has been killed in the prime of his life and he's gone now, like I just feel like everybody should be allowed to say that, like it's a human acknowledgement. And I think that's kind of where we were talking about it as a group. I do think there's more, like there's like you could feel the air of the room like heavy with words not spoken. Like there was definitely more on people's hearts that they didn't share. And I think out in the secular world, like it just wasn't talked of for like maybe an opposite reason. Like maybe they're like, I don't even know who he is, or like I don't care, or like whatever he says, he's probably super this or that. Like, so I think it was kind of a funny contrast. Like some people don't talk about it for one reason, and then people in the, I guess, more conservative camp, for lack of a better word, are also like everybody's kind of afraid of rejection, or they're just not well informed enough, so they don't speak about it. That's sort of been my experience, I guess.
Yeah, one of my kids actually young adult kids said it's really hard to actually have an opinion that might for other people right now. That's really sad to me. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing. And I'm so grateful that we were able to come on and share a little bit of insight. And before I have to let you go, because I know you have to get back to class, what would you say to someone that's in your situation who has been following a path with their parents and then shifted, or anyone actually in a situation like that where the loved ones are leaving something that's dear to you? What would you say to them as a way to kind of walk through that?
Yeah, there's a lot that could be said. I would say, like, it sounds so trite, but believe in yourself. Like, I really think we're stronger than we know that we are. Like, we don't realize how much we have, like how much strength we have inside. And I guess maybe even more than that, like, trust yourself. And that really can be easily said than done. Also, like, try to find people around who really build you up and make you feel stronger. Because for me, that's really helped me. Like, I really wouldn't be here today without, like, support of people in my life who believed in me and, like, really every day, like, still believe in me when I don't believe in myself. So, like, just try to find those people and keep them in your life, and just keep reaching out to them, because if they really care about you, they'll stand by you and help lift you up when you're struggling.
I love that. Cariysa, you have been such a lovely guest. I am so appreciative of you taking the time today. And I just thank you so much. And we'll have to stay in touch. I'm wanting to stay in touch and hear how your life goes from here. But you are a strong, beautiful person. And I'm grateful.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure to be on the podcast.
My parents quit believing. Now what? Within our main question today, I think we find this one. What do we do when our faith strongholds fall away? I found Cariysa to have such a gentle, thoughtful soul, and I really appreciated her sharing about the faith crisis she experienced as a teenager. And I'm inspired by a couple of things in particular. One, how God stepped in the wake of that unsettling time. And two, how Cariysa time and again credits God with supplying for her needs. Would her faith be so strong now if not for that confusing development? Just as we parents cannot control the outcome of our adult children's journeys, like the prodigal father in the Bible, adult children cannot control the outcome of their parents' journeys. But we know that God cares about every soul, and that even when we give up on Him, He never gives up on us. And we can continue to pray for those who, for whatever reason, have lost their faith along the way. I believe that God hears every prayer, every plea, and that He rewards those who refuse to give up on Him, even when the rest of the world ceases to believe. I also appreciated hearing from Cariysa about her hopeful attitude toward her peers, challenging the thought of the day that young people are abandoning God. Maybe they are, but maybe the wounds of young people today are doing just the opposite and helping them search even harder for the pearl of great price. I found Cariysa's perspective hopeful and refreshing, and I hope you did as well. In our next episode, we'll ask a non-believer, why God, or why God? Until then, don't lose sight of the light.